Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I am your host, Lena, and I am so happy to be back here with you again today. This week, we are continuing our discussion of Dancing the Dream. I swear, someday I will not say that. I realized this is episode 31. There are 46 pieces in this book, which means 46 regular episodes, and we're on episode 31. So we are so close to crossing that finish line and completing this book. Of course, we still have some time left, but we are certainly moving very quickly. So this week, we will be reading a piece that looks to me like a bit of a reflection. And it's a beautiful piece that seems to be accompanied by an intentional and quite beautiful photograph. So I am looking forward to discussing all of this with you in today's episode. So for now, I want to invite you to get comfortable and get cozy and join me as I read through this short reflective piece written by Michael Jackson. And it is called Mother Earth. Mother Earth. I was walking along the beach one winter day. Looking down, I saw a wave push a feather up on the sand. It was a seagull feather stained with oil. I picked it up and felt the dark, slick film on my fingers. I couldn't help wondering if the bird had survived. Was it all right out there? I knew it wasn't. I felt sad to think how carelessly we treat our home. The earth we all share is not just a rock tossed through space, but a living, nurturing being. She cares for us. She deserves our care in return. We've been treating Mother Earth the way some people treat a rental apartment. Just trash it and move on. But there's no place to move on to now. We have brought our garbage and our wars and our racism to every part of the world. We must begin to clean her up, and that means cleaning up our own hearts and minds first, because they led us to poison our dear planet. The sooner we change, the easier it will be to feel our love for Mother Earth and the love she so freely gives back to us. Oh my goodness. So this piece, Mother Earth, this is a special piece. When I flipped open to this page, I realized almost immediately that when I visited Neverland, which I discussed in the June 25th bonus episode, and I picked some leaves off of one of the trees there, this was the page in the book I pressed it into. I've since removed those leaves and they're dried and I have them contained somewhere. But I remember doing that and it wasn't intentional. I just opened the book and that's where it happened to land. But I instantly recognized that. The last time I read this, I was in California and I was a couple miles from Neverland. So it's interesting to read this now. This is a straightforward piece. There's no hinted messages. There's no real metaphor here. This is a straightforward call to each and every one of us to start caring about the earth. I mean, that's how I see this. This is a straight up call. There's a few things I want to discuss about this piece. First of all, before getting into, some of my line by line commentary on the piece, I want to talk about how much I just really like the structure of this. This is 3 paragraphs, and each one is doing something succinct. In the first paragraph, Michael is setting us in this scene with him. He's inviting us to this moment of walking along the beach and discovering a feather stained with oil. In the second paragraph, he is drawing that moment into a greater reflection. He's showing how these moments of awareness lead to a deeper understanding of our greatest problems. And then third, it's a call to action. And that's a lot to accomplish in 3 paragraphs. It's a lot to put forth in a piece called Mother Earth. But there's something especially respectful about this piece. And I think in part it's because there is no metaphor. There is no hidden symbol or meaning. It is a straightforward piece. And in that way, it is a respectful piece. I actually feel when I read this, I can sense Michael's disgust and anger. And that's interesting because there's ultimately a message of love in this, both a message of love for Mother Earth and the earth and nature itself, but also for one another and life as a whole. But I really feel a lot of anger in it. I couldn't help but think about this when he referenced the oil on the feather. I thought about the various oil spills, the significant oil spills that we've seen in this world over the last few decades. And then I started to think about pipelines and drilling and all of the ways in which so many practices we partake in as human beings in our civilized society is ultimately kind of stripping the earth of what it's offering us and exploiting it for what it is. In the second paragraph, he talks about how he felt sad thinking about how carelessly we treat our home. He says the earth we all share is not just a rock tossed through space, but a living, nurturing being. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but there are really interesting documentaries, but also if you want a more exploratory depiction of what I'm talking about. But there are documentaries and also short videos that show what would happen to the earth if human beings were eradicated, if we just ceased to exist. What would happen to the earth? And from everything I've seen, the earth would eventually heal itself. It would heal itself. Just like when there's a wildfire and everything is burned down and everything is gone and an environment is destroyed, there are always those first seedlings that sprout and bring life back, and it builds upon itself. The earth is ultimately a picture of resilience, but it can only handle so much abuse. It's just like people in that way. We can't expect endless strength from something if we're not going to pour back into it. And actually, when I read this section, I actually thought of something else unrelated to earth. And I'm only sharing it because it was just an interesting thought to me. Maybe because of where I am at in my own life and my own health journey and things like that. I thought about how the earth, in the way he describes it, is very similar to how so many of us experience and treat our own bodies, where our bodies are simply a place we inhabit and we don't always put the most care back into them. We don't always pay attention to what it's craving and what it needs. We get angry at our own bodies for needing so much sometimes. It's easy to feel for some of us like our body is our enemy when we are trying to deal with our weight or diseases we're dealing with, or any number of struggles that connect to our body. And there's all kinds of things that can happen to our body that is not, on us, things that we really couldn't do much about. But there's a lot we can do to take care of it. And sometimes I think we treat our bodies like we treat the earth, where it's just this place we spend time and we take it for granted. We don't take care of it as we should. We don't nurture it as we should. We don't stand up for it all the time as we should. Now, I'm not saying this is everyone, obviously, but a lot of people struggle, I think, with self-care. And this kind of reminded me of that. I'm not sure why either, but it did remind me of that. He says, she cares for us. She deserves our care in return. We've been treating Mother Earth the way some people treat a rental apartment. Just trash it and move on. And he's honestly right. I mean, he's right, which is horrible to admit and recognize, but it's the truth. He's right. And we do this in large and small ways. I know this varies depending on where in the world you live. This is very much a cultural reflection. So I don't want to suggest that the world as a whole is like this. But in the United States, I'm sorry, I think most Americans would agree, the US is dirty. It's dirty. It is a beautiful country, and it is expansive and diverse and massive. And I have been very privileged to travel all over the United States and see great expanses of it. But the problem is, as beautiful as the United States is, it is a very dirty country. Our major cities have substantial littering problems, where you can drive on the highway in Los Angeles, just as an example, and anywhere you look on the side of the road is streams of garbage, just a tremendous amount of garbage. And garbage that festers and stays and gets embedded into the landscape all over. The same thing with New York City, the same thing with every major city I have gone to. Now, there are some that are far better than others, and there are areas of this country that are beautiful and pristine and well kept. But again, it's a cultural thing. And I think about this, and I'm only speaking from the US perspective here because it's the one I can speak to accurately. But in the United States, we have a cultural value of individualism over the collective. And it's a value we are all raised within. Our individual identities matter. Our individual needs and wants and dreams and desires matter more than doing what's best for the community. And this is not something I'm agreeing with, but this is a cultural value that's instilled from the time we're pretty young. It's just in the nature of things. And I'm sure, even those who are not from the US can attest to having observed this in the United States. And because of that, you see a culture that doesn't take care of its environment, that doesn't ensure that the beaches and the streets and the rivers are clean, that treats rural parts of this country as well as other parts of the world as playgrounds for exploitation and taking resources for our gain. And there's not a sense of accountability or responsibility there. And what he's talking about is exactly the way that it feels. And it's something that as an American, I am certainly not proud of. And I'm sure this is reflected in other cultures as well. I just happen to know that there are also cultures where this is not the case, where there is a collective sense of care for the environment. So this brings me to his final point when he says we must clean up our own hearts and minds first because they led us to poison our dear planet. Well, all I can say about that is he's completely right. To change a culture, you have to change the individuals and vice versa. So for the culture to change, you need influential figures and education to make people think differently. And then you need, as a result, for policy to be put into place to actually make real change. But you can't just despair because there's really no other option. I feel like that's part of what he's saying here. I find this piece really interesting to read on the back of last week, because last week I felt kind of frustrated. I mean, throughout the recording, in part because I felt it was difficult to articulate how upsetting the whole situation was to me, to imagine the way we are not cared for by our governments in various ways, and the ways in which people are the victims of those in power. But then I'm also, this week, angry, reading about how the planet is a victim of people, and the animals on this planet are the victims of people. At the same time, many people do not feel empowered to change anything, because those in power are the ones that are making decisions about how we treat our world and the pollution of our world and the way we are tapping into and in some cases exploiting our resources. So it's an interesting thing to read back to back. These are two pieces that I see as somewhat heated. In their own way, they're somewhat heated. They're not introducing ideas that Michael has not addressed yet so far. I mean, this is hardly the first piece in which Michael is making an environmental plea, but in some ways it's the most heated piece. And when I, of course, read this, I think about Earth Song, which I know I referenced in the Planet Earth episode back, oh my God, in week 2 of this podcast. But in some ways, this one is a stronger, more willful response to this issue. He's calling us out in this. The earth cares for us and deserves more. We're treating her the way people treat a rental. We're trashing it and forgetting about it. But there's nowhere left to go. And we've brought our garbage and our wars and our racism to every part of the world. And that's true. Every part of the world is affected by these choices. This actually reminded me of another song. It's not a Michael Jackson song, so I don't expect anyone to listen, to know it or to listen. But I'm a really big fan of the folk singer Pete Seeger. If you're not familiar with Pete Seeger, he was an incredibly vocal folk singer in the 1950s and beyond. Actually a bit earlier than that too, but the 1950s and beyond in the United States, very progressive, and really spoke out on behalf of civil rights and racial equality and environmental concerns and just every kind of imaginable major issue he was really present for. But he has a song called Garbage. And in that song he says, "Garbage, garbage, we're filling up our minds with garbage." And he describes the overflow of garbage, and he goes through these scenes which he's discussing the way our food that we don't finish goes into landfills and how that goes out to the ocean, and he kind of just builds and builds and builds. So by the end of it, we have this picture of a world that is overflowing with garbage. And of course that reminds me of the movie, the animated film WALL-E, and that whole film and the whole premise of that film being we've run out of space on Earth because we are filling it up with garbage. And then that, of course, makes me think about the microplastics in the ocean and the gigantic mass of plastic floating around somewhere in the Pacific, I believe, and the natural disasters that are always happening. If you are from the US, then you know the recent flooding in Texas and the massacre there, and just so many mounting, horrifying natural disasters and concerns, and the ways in which everywhere we look, there's this blatant disrespect for the creator of this world, whatever that creator is in your own, view and heart. If there's a blatant disrespect there. So I love that Michael is challenging us. I love that he is asking us to look inside of ourselves and to find the part of ourselves that thinks it's okay to participate in this kind of gluttony, or maybe not gluttony, maybe not where you're from, I don't know, but to participate in any way in the continual poisoning of the planet. He ends saying, the sooner we change, the easier it will be to feel our love for Mother Earth and the love she so freely gives back to us. Positioned next to this piece, is a beautiful photo of Michael. This is another photograph taken by Dilip Mehta in his photo series with Michael. It is a piece that has Michael's profile, and he is standing on a beach, and there is a beautiful sunset that his body is partially breaking. And he has his fedora on and looks to have a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. The silhouette of him is backlit, so his form is entirely dark, just like the seagulls that are flying around him. And what I love about this photo is that he could be anyone, walking along a beach, finding a feather covered in oil. He could be anyone trying to appreciate the beauty of the world and being interrupted by the sight of garbage or litter or the evidence of humans disrupting the natural world. But it's Michael Jackson, and we can see that it's Michael Jackson in part because of his hat and how iconic that silhouette is. And Michael is brought down to earth in a way that so many of the other photos in the book, he's not. So many of the photos in this book are from music videos or even award shows or professional photo shoots for magazines or promotions. But this piece, this picture, is just a man on a beach taking in the world. And he could be any man, but he's not any man. He's Michael Jackson. And so I think there's something profound about stepping down from the pedestal he is often put on and just existing in this very beautifully shot, very authentic and almost candid style of a photo. It's stunning. And I can only assume he includes this with this piece as a kind of grounding, as a kind of leveling of the conversation. Showing Michael, now I know Earth Song had not come out yet, to be clear, but if it were to say, for example, show a still from Michael's music video for Earth Song, that wouldn't have the same effect because we'd be reminded of his elevated status, and it would be about the production of that, and it would be almost self-promotion. But that's not happening here, and I think that that's a brilliant choice when it comes to pairing a photograph with a piece of writing for the book. Incidentally, it is one of my favorite photos of Michael, along with so many of Dilip Mehta's photography. I believe in the next piece there's also some as well that we'll talk about maybe next week. But this is another example of, I think about this actually because I bought this book and I became a fan, in the 2020s. I can only imagine when this book came out, when you didn't have easy access to photographs of Michael. You couldn't look on your phone and see them. Like, you'd have to have magazines, I guess. You would otherwise wouldn't have photos of him. So I can imagine when this book came out, to have all of these varied and beautiful photos of him, including ones like this that are so authentic. That must have been really powerful too, especially for someone as massive, as Michael. So with all of that, I really appreciated this piece. I feel, again, kind of dark and sad at the end of it, kind of like I have felt last week. I don't expect to always feel uplifted by Michael's pieces, of course. But the reality is we can't always just be living in ecstasy, so to speak. We've got to face these realities and let the love that we have for the world not just shine brightly, but also kind of quiet itself a little bit and grow humble and look reflectively at ourselves to actually make a change. And actually what I'm saying now reminds me of the Ebony Jet interview. If you know, I've referenced this 5,000 times on this podcast, but when Michael at the end says,
yeah, well, people don't look at themselves honestly. They don't look at themselves and point the finger at them. It's always the other guy's fault or somebody else. You should change yourself. Look at yourself. Make better of yourself.
That's what this piece kind of reminded me of. Like, we could absolutely blame the cultures we're in or the governments we are either a part of or that we observe around the world. But ultimately, each of us should hopefully do what we can on our own individual level to affect change in some way. And it just all kind of comes together for me. So with that said, I will draw this episode to a close, but I do want to thank you for joining me and listening to this. If you have any comments or questions for me about this episode or reading Michael Jackson in general, please don't hesitate to reach out at readingmichaeljackson@yahoo.com. Thank you once again, and maybe listen to Earth Song today. Maybe listen to Earth Song today, or maybe listen to Heal the World, or maybe listen to Man in the Mirror. Any one of these songs that will help this message resonate a little bit deeper. I think I will too. Have a wonderful week and weekend, and we will talk soon. Take care.